And you all are based out of where?
I'm in New York.
Oh, you're based in Botham.
Live on Periscope? All righty. Hey, it's Jordan. I am here in the Dallas West Church of Christ, right near downtown Dallas. I'm here with Minister Sammie Berry, and this is the very church that Botham John was both a worshiper in. He also taught Bible study here, and he was part of the community here for the few years after he moved to Texas. Botham John, if you're not familiar with the story, Ty and I have been down here for a few days. Botham John was a 26-year-old African American. He's from St. Lucia, originally, and moved here a few years ago. He went to college here, and he then got a job with PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a financial auditing company. And he, on September 6th, so a little over a month ago, was just where you might be right now. He was just hanging out in his apartment in Dallas, and a white police officer by the name of Amber Geiger, the story has changed multiple times, but she came to Botham's apartment. Botham was on the 4th floor. This woman, Amber, lived right under him on the 3rd floor, intruded in on his apartment and shot him dead. Now, there's been multiple different accounts from Amber on what exactly happened. She claims after a long shift, because she was off duty at the time, she's a police officer, was off duty, claims she mistook his apartment for her apartment. I have reported on inconsistencies in her story, but the bottom line is she was let out on a $300,000 bond after 1 hour. She has been charged with manslaughter, but we have no information on why manslaughter and not murder. You would think, common sense, if you just go to some random person's apartment and shoot the person dead, that's murder. She has been fired from the Dallas PD, but she is not in prison or in jail waiting for trial, and very little information has been provided to Botham's family or your community. Before we get to what happened, I want to just, who was Botham John? He was here for a few years. You've been a minister here for almost 2 decades. Tell the audience, who was this man that we no longer have?
Okay. Botham was a Bible class teacher. He taught the young adults on Wednesday nights, talking about the life of Christ. And then he was also a worship leader and song leader on Sunday mornings. He would lead us in our singing pretty much every Sunday morning. He would lead, and then when he was not leading here or the main song leader here, many times he would visit other congregations in the community and lead singing there as well.
Mm-hmm. And was he, did he have a sense of humor? Was he a shy guy? Was he serious?
Both of them are very outgoing individual. He had a very captivating smile. He was a charismatic individual, and never met a stranger. Everybody who knew him loved him. He was loved here in this congregation. In fact, probably maybe 2 or 3 weeks before he was killed, he and I had a conversation about how loved he felt here at the congregation, how he felt at home here. But yeah, very outgoing individual. Everybody in the church loved him. Everybody in our brotherhood who heard him sing always commented to me about what an excellent song leader he was. He was an individual who loved Jesus Christ. He was a very organized individual. He had even also started to talk to me about changes and improvements that we could make in our worship process here on Sunday morning. In fact, the night that he was killed, he was actually working on that with another individual here. They were texting back and forth, working on that, and it was something that we were getting ready to implement in our worship service. But of course, we were never able to do that because we lost him on September the 6th.
And obviously this is the first time the police have done this with the help of the media, but they tried to kind of blame the victim, dehumanize the victim, so you get reports There was marijuana in his apartment, which really doesn't mean much, doesn't mean anything. But from everything you're saying, it was a guy. He was on a good career path, loved in the community, no problems, and essentially just a member of the community, and that's it.
That's right. Well, when that report came out that they found marijuana in his apartment, I mean, that was very devastating, you know, one, for his family, for his church family, because me knowing Botham, knowing his character, the type of individual that he was, I know personally that he does not use drugs. My daughter knows him personally and told me that he doesn't use drugs. So I don't understand the purpose of that information being published. Although, well, I was hurt by the fact that it was published. I know the reason that they did it was to, you know, drag his name through the mud, so to speak, because everything that we know about him, everything that was said about him, was all positive. And so I guess they tried to find some dirt on him, but those things were not truthful. I do not believe, you won't be able to convince me that those drugs that they found in his apartment belonged to him. In fact, none of those items belonged to him. Why would he have a police vest? Why would he have all that police paraphernalia? And he certainly was not a drug user.
Now, was there any time since you and him were close, did the name Amber Geiger ever come up? Did he know her? Are you aware of any relationship between the two?
No, as far as I know. And of course, me working with him was never, or talking to him was never about his personal relationships in that way. But in our conversations, her name never came up. And through my discussions with his family, as far as they know, he did not know her. And from what I understand through talking to the Texas Rangers when they came out to visit with us and to share information about the case, it's their understanding that he did not know her either. And these were questions that they questioned Miss Geiger, did she know him? And my understanding is that she said she did not.
And before I get into the specifics of what happened with Botham, we go all around the country. So I've been to St. Louis, where they have a lot of police problems. We've been to Detroit, Flint, Chicago. It seems like you have police departments that are generally investigating themselves. In this case, the Dallas PD, because she was with the Dallas PD, passed it off to the Texas Rangers, and the Texas Rangers decided to file manslaughter charges. However, unless I'm missing something, they haven't provided any information on how they determined that. Obviously, manslaughter would be a lesser charge than murder, so we don't have any information as far as her background. We don't have her police records. There was a shooting. She shot someone in 2017. She claims this person took her taser, but we don't have any information about that. And there's also been reports of some of her social media writings that had a tinge of kind of police superiority. There was some stuff I read about that she wrote about former President Obama. I mean, obviously you're a man of faith, but does it strike you and Botham's family? There's no other way to say it. The makings of a cover-up.
Well, it would certainly seem to be, and I understand, or have some understanding of police culture, that they like to protect their own. And so that is troubling, because of the facts have not been shared with us. You know, we don't know why she said she issued commands. We don't know what those commands were. We don't know why she felt it was necessary to use deadly force. As far as I can see, I don't think it was a deadly force situation. So why, of all the options that she had through her police training, why would she automatically go to deadly force? See, here in America, the problem that we have is police officers, especially white police officers, are afraid of black males. They feel that anytime they're in the presence of a black male, that is deadly force. And that's a situation that we have to address in this country. That's a situation that has to be changed in the training of police officers, that just because you're in the presence of a black male does not mean that your life is in danger and you are in a deadly force situation. And so the other thing is, there's a police, here in Dallas, there's a police review board. Community review board members from the community are part of that board, and they can review cases, but they don't have subpoena power. In other words, it's a review board, but it doesn't have teeth. And so that's something that we're asking for as well, this police review board to be able to look at these cases, the cases of police brutality. We can subpoena records, we can subpoena information and try to get to the bottom of these cases. And Botham's case is not the only case. There are many that over the years, I think since 2012, there's been a lot of light put forth on cases like this since then. But throughout history, here in the city of Dallas, we've had cases where young black men have been shot and killed by police officers, and nothing has ever happened.
Mm-hmm. To me, another problem is the double standard for police versus black people. So on one end, you have a woman who just murdered someone for, as of now, it seems like relative strangers. Mm-hmm. She was let out after an hour on $300,000 bond. Mm-hmm. However, there was a protest in the name of Botham John, and you had 9 protesters that were arrested. From what I know, basically towards the end of the protest, thrown in jail for 40 hours. From speaking with some of them, were taunted by police. They were in some cases, kind of more like cages than actual cells. So you have a white police officer who just murdered someone. Either there is more to the situation that we don't know, or not all is well in her mind. Right. But she's out free, as far as I know, not under house arrest or anything like that. Yeah. But these men and women, there were 9 of them, a mix, mostly African-American, were basically in jail for 40 hours. It seems to me, and when you loop in the fact that a separate case, OShea Terry, which we've been covering, they won't release the officer's name because he's received death threats. Kind of doesn't make sense. Nobody knows who he is, so how could there be threats? My point to you is, what are your thoughts on it? It seems like there's different rules as far as white police officers than there are for black men. Yeah,
well, clearly there's a double standard, because the other thing that happened, and this is something that needs to change, is she was not questioned, or she was released and was not questioned about this for up to 72 hours. See, she wasn't arrested until 3 days later. She was able to go home free for 3 days. Then she was arrested, and then, as you pointed out, within 1 hour released. She wasn't arrested here in Dallas, where the crime was committed. She actually turned herself in Kaufman County. We don't know why that's the case. So yes, that's clearly because let's say the situation was different, that Botham entered her apartment by mistake and shot and killed her. He would have been arrested immediately. His bond would have probably been $2 million or more, you see. So there's clearly a double standard. And as I mentioned earlier, there are other cases, OShea Terry's case over in Arlington, still questions that are outstanding. And all of these areas of social injustice, these are things that we have to do something about. We cannot continue in this country as we have been in the past. And so we've got to make sure that we get justice for Botham, and also for others who have been mistreated, and then also change the image of the black male in the minds of our police departments.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is it seems like more or less the national media really will start to cover these things if you start to see, mass protests, like we saw in Ferguson, in some ways if there's a chance of like a shootout at the OK Corral between police and protesters. If not, they're pretty much set on, Trump and all that 24/7. So it seems like these situations kind of become normalized because they're not getting that mass attention. That's part of why we came down. Do you think, as far as basically a lot of these other killings, like Trayvon Martin, Jordan Davis, Michael Brown, heinous in every case, but this is a different level. You have someone just in their apartment. It's not like he was pulled over, this and that. What does that say about the threat that black people in America are facing, that honestly, just you could be killed just minding your own business?
Yeah. Well, it gives me a great deal of concern because, see, the situation that we have now in America, when I'm stopped, by a white police officer, he's concerned, he's afraid for his life, I'm afraid for mine. I don't want to, set him off or her off in any kind of way. And so it's a big problem. Again, too many times, and now we've created this concept in America that, well, if the officer says, well, I feared for my life, well, to me, that's an easy defense, because that all you have to do is say, well, I feared for my life, and you can get off. And so we've got to address that particular defense as well. I think it's being abused in too many cases where people are being shot and killed, and all the officer has to do is say, I feared for my life. And that's happened with black individuals and white as well, where they're using that as a loophole, and I think it's wrong.
Within the black community, there seems at times to be tension between the older guard and the younger guard. We just saw it last night where, younger people, maybe 20s, 30s, economic boycott. In some cases, like, we need to protect ourselves and arm ourselves. Where older people, more or less like the NAACP, this and that, kind of, and sometimes want to try to work with the police and community relations and all this. I'm sure you see people of all ages here. Yep. What are your thoughts? Because it seems that in some ways protests could make a big difference, but in other ways it seems like the history of America is real change happens when they fear their wallets.
Right. Well, it's quite unfortunate that if what I've experienced in my lifetime is, and I'll say in the beginning, I believe in protests, but doing it peacefully. Now, unfortunately, it seems as though you don't get the proper attention until, you create minor riots. Okay, I'm reminded of the case out in Los Angeles, a number of years ago when Bush 1 was president, and and he said, well, I didn't even realize we had a race issue here in America until they, this was the Rodney King case, and they tore up Los Angeles, and then he says, hey, well, maybe we do have a race problem. So that's the problem. Is people don't want to stop and listen to you until you begin to riot in the streets, stop traffic, and those types of things. I'm more being older from the point of view is, yes, let's protest, let's do it peacefully, let's sit down and talk about, let's understand all the facts and get all the facts on the table, and then start addressing the problems. And for me, even at the apartment complex, you see, to me, they shouldn't get off the hook here, because, that's where the mistake was made. My understanding is it's a mistake that's made quite often. Mm-hmm. Unless they make changes at that complex, it could happen again.
When you say it's a mistake that makes, what mistake are you speaking of as far as the apartment complex?
Well, in terms of the apartment complex, this is what I understand through talking to Botham's parents. At his front door, there is a red welcome mat there, because in the past, he had made the mistake going to the wrong apartment. He put that red welcome mat there so that he would never make that mistake again. Mm-hmm. Now, that should have also told Amber Geiger that wasn't her apartment, because it was a red doormat there. So they need to make changes at that apartment complex. So
is there something about the layout that makes it confusing?
Apparently, I've never been in, but apparently so. That it's very similar on every floor, but to me, they're very simple things, changes that could be made so that doesn't happen again.
And let me ask you, I mean, whatever you could reveal, because obviously conversations with his family are private, but to me, I would think on one end, the police are saying, well, we can't release this information because it might prejudice jury, or it might mean that they'll have to move the case out of Dallas. And they give you reasons why we can't release the 911 call. We can't release her police records, information about the body camera, and what have you. But I would think, as a parent who just lost your child, one of the most terrible parts of it is not knowing what happened. Is the family dealing with that, as far as you just, I mean, my understanding, the mother and him spoke every day, and they were supposed to talk that night. It must be kind of torture not knowing what happened.
Yeah, I'm sure that it is. Yeah, Botham and his mother were very close. Botham and his sister were close, and they talked all the time. And I think it puts a cloud over things when the police, the Texas Rangers, and those who know won't release this information. You know, I'm a father. I have two daughters, and for me personally, and Botham was a member of my congregation. For me personally, I would like to know the timeline from A to Z. What happened? Mm-hmm. What time did she show up at that apartment? What time did she shoot him? What time did she call 911? What time was CPR administered? What time did they take him to the hospital? I mean, every single detail the family needs to know so that they can get closure. You know, they'll never have closure until these questions are answered.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, it seems like this is a very unusual killing. I mean, all these killings are unusual, but this one in particular. But it seems like most of these things are happening in a there's clouds hanging down, mm-hmm. which is economic oppression, mm-hmm. gentrification, mm-hmm. Joblessness equals hopelessness, mm-hmm. From Chicago to Detroit to Dallas. Can you kind of talk about what you see in the community here? Because what I'm seeing is, like a lot of places we go, you got a beautiful 20-block radius downtown, yeah. and then you could drive 10 minutes and it looks like a different city. Yeah.
Well, you know, somebody said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But you know, something else that I find is the lack of power also corrupts. So people in the community feel like they don't have any say-so. Black males feel that, you know, a police officer can enter my home, shoot me dead, and nothing will be done about it. So we have to be very careful in this country when we create an environment that has been created, when we create a system that penalizes an individual just because of his race and his gender, being a black male, that there's a high probability that he's going to either end up dead or in prison because of the environment that has been created in this country. So, yes, that's a big problem with all the economic situation that we have, and then the fact that the odds are against you, you know, when you are a black male.
Absolutely. And wanted to ask you, because as a minister now, obviously parents are worried about their kids, but has this kind of shook you as far as, like, I'm sure you're very close with some others in your congregation, because if you could be basically a cookie cutter, great kid, great young man like Botham and be shot and killed. Imagine people who might have issues in their life.
Right. Well, yeah. In our congregation, we have all ages. We have people that represents all age groups, all economic statuses, and so. But where I have the most concern is that black male. They need to be mentored. They need to have positive role models, and every parent in this church, every parent in this community, every parent in the black community is concerned about their young black males. I'm talking to parents about what conversations should you be having with your son? What conversations should you be having with them when they are stopped by a police officer? What should they do? And so we're talking about that here. We have police officers who are members of our congregation, and we've actually had them here in the past to talk to us about it because of previous killings, and from what has happened, we need to bring them back again to talk about it some more, because our young people don't know what to think. In one case, if you have someone who's a bad actor, he's a drug pusher, he's doing this or that, but then on the other end, you have Botham, who was at church every Sunday. He loved God, he loved everybody. All he did was ever helped, and you see what happens to him. Then young people, they don't know where to turn. They don't know what they should I go left or should I go right? Either way, you end up in the same place. So that's a problem.
What are your thoughts if the roles were reversed? If this was a black officer, went in randomly, white girl with blonde hair, and the roles were reversed, do you think over a month later we'd have no information and that officer would be out on bond?
No, I think if it was all reversed, that officer would be in jail, and there would be a lot of information out there about what's going on. No, I don't. I think you'd see it totally and completely different approach than what we're seeing in this case.
So then the question becomes, and I get this a lot from the audience, like, great reporting, but this is America. It's a one big giant corrupt cover-up, and nothing's going to change. If you're a man of faith, what do you say to, especially black men? Because I've been talking to some black men this week, and the apathy that has settled in at a young age, honestly for good reason, is very strong. So how do you get change in a country that frankly was born on racism and all the things we're talking about? How do we begin to, because the media is not covering it, obviously the president that we have, these things are happening under the last president too. You probably don't have all the answers, but what's the steps forward?
Yeah, well, I think one, we have to understand the system in which we live, and that's why I encourage people to, number one, register to vote, and number two, go out there and vote. When you're selected for juries, go to and do your jury duty, sit on the juries, and so we've got to work within the system that we have, but then we also need to elect people who can make changes to the current system in which we're living in, because it's very difficult at this particular time. As I said earlier, the odds are against you if you are a young black male. So we've got to understand the system that we have and work within that system to get the right types of changes made.
And my last question, I mean, obviously, one would hope, but from everything you've seen from start to finish, this is still relatively recent. Do you foresee there being some form of justice in this case, or do you have a kind of pit in your stomach that, maybe she'll get manslaughter and some type of, she was overworked and...
Well, my prayer is that we get justice for both them. What Amber needs to understand is one, she was a trained professional, and so I don't buy the I was overworked, I was tired. She was a trained professional, and so and my prayer is that we get justice for him. I can't even think about, how I would feel. It would be devastating for me, for this church, for his family, for our community, for this nation, if we don't get justice in this particular case, because she was trained as a professional, she should know how to conduct herself in that type of a situation, which to me, she set all of her training aside. And that's the other real problem, since we don't know all the facts about what happened. But if we don't, that's it. That's the worst case scenario that we could have, is you have a young man lose his life, and then she were to get off free, then that would be terrible. But I think what it also tells me is that we must continue to push for, we must continue to ask for, we must continue to request, we must continue to demand justice for Botham, not only Botham, but other cases like this. And we've got to stop these types of police shootings here in this country.
Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. And we'll still be here. We've been covering this all week. We're going to try to do some other interviews tomorrow, maybe Friday too. You can see the other videos we've done right here on the YouTube channel. If you're watching on Periscope, youtube.com/Jordan Sheridan Reports. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the country. There's a hurricane pounding Florida and possibly moving upwards. There's the daily chaos around Trump. But I also think share this video and get this out, because at the end of the day, you can't normalize murder, right? And you also can't normalize two systems for two races. You can't normalize, three justice systems, one for police, one for middle-aged white people, and then one for black people. Because like the minister said, this would be a whole different situation if it was a black police officer and a white person that was murdered. And this was a human being who didn't deserve to die and was leading a really great, fulfilling life with a really great trajectory forward. So that's why we're here. We'll continue covering it, and definitely share the video. And if you want, we just passed 10,000 on our GoFundMe, so definitely contribute there so we could cover more stories like this.